Hi again. Right, so yesterday it was getting really, really exciting in our story, George's Marvellous Medicine. And today is the day we're going to find out what has happened. So we've read all these chapters so far, and this one is called Grandma Gets the Medicine. So now we're finally going to find out what happens to Grandma if she gets the medicine. Yesterday, I asked you to draw a picture to see what do you think would happen. What do you think would happen to Grandma? What do you think is going to happen when she has the medicine? Do you think she's going to realise it's different? Do you think she's going to spit it out? Do you think anything will happen to her? Do you think she'll change? Oh, there's so many things. Right, okay, let's start reading. I can't wait any longer. So Grandma gets the medicine. Grandma sat in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George closely as he crossed the room towards her. "You're late," she snapped. "I don't think I am, Grandma." "Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence," she shouted. "But you'd finished your sentence, Grandma." "There you go again," she cried. "Always interrupting and arguing. You really are a tiresome little boy. What's the time?" "It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma." "You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me my medicine. Shake the bottle first, then pour it into the spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful." "Are you going to gulp it down all in one go?" George asked her, "or will you sip it?" "What I do is none of your business," the old woman said. "Fill the spoon." George removed the cork and began to pour the thick brown stuff onto the spoon. He couldn't help but thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone on into making this crazy stuff. The shaving foam, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them, not to mention those powerful animal pills and powders, and the liquids, and the brown paint. "Open your mouth wide, Grandma," he said, "and I'll pop it in." The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth and showed her disgusting pale brown teeth. "Here we go," George cried out. "Swallow it down." He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. Oh, how exciting. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ooh!" and her whole body shot up, whoosh, into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on a current. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box. She didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended mid in the air, about 2 feet up, still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. "Is something wrong, Grandma?" George asked politely. "Are you all right?" Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvellous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You would have thought she had swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from her chair. So this is what's happened so far. She's shot up and she's basically frozen in midair. She's so shocked. And again, I really like the words that the author has used. And she was rigid. She was frozen, quivering. Her eyes were bulging. She was suspended. Lots of lovely mixture. I wonder if anything else will happen. I wonder if she'll just be stuck there forever. Let's carry on. Then down she came again with a plop, back into her seat. "Call the fire brigade," she shouted suddenly. "My stomach's on fire." "It's just the medicine, Grandma," George said. "It's good, strong stuff." "Fire!" the old woman yelled. "Fire in the basement. Get a bucket. Man the hoses. Do something quick." "Cool it, Grandma," George said. But he got a bit of a shock when he saw smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. "By golly, you really are on fire," George said. "Of course I'm on fire," she yelled. I'll be burnt to a crisp. I'll be fried to a frizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot. George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. Open your mouth, Grandma, he cried. He could hardly see for the smoke, but he managed to pour half a jugful down her throat. A sizzling sound, the kind you get when you hold a hot frying pan under a cold tap, came from deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag bucked and shied and snorted. She gasped and guggled. Spouts of water came shooting out of her, and the smoke cleared away. The fire's out, George announced proudly. You'll be all right now, Grandma. All right, she yelled. Who's all right? There's Jackie jumpers in my tummy. There's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom, she began, bouncing up and down in the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. You'll find it's doing a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma, George said. Good, she screamed. Doing me good? It's killing me. Then she began to bulge. She was swelling. She was puffing all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face turned from purple to green. But wait, she had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She'd stopped swelling and she was going down. She was slowly getting thinner again, shrinking back and back slowly to her shrivelling old self. How's things, Grandma? George said. No answer. Then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp twist and suddenly a sharp jerk, and she flipped herself clear out of the chair and landed nearly 2 feet on the carpet. That's terrific, Grandma. Oh, sorry. That's terrific, Grandma, George cried. You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up on your own and you're not even using a stick. Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvellous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there and watching what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered. He soon found out. Suddenly she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upwards. Up, up, about an inch every few seconds. And in the beginning, George didn't even notice it. Can you see when I'm reading? You see these 3 dots, so you take a bigger pause. So it was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upwards. Up, up, up. So you take a bigger pause. It's so that what the author's doing is creating suspense. If you read it really quickly, you'll obviously know quicker what happens, but when you're reading it, by having dots, it gives a little pause so you really want to know what happens next. But then, when she had passed 5'6" mark, she was going upwards, being 6 feet tall. George gave a jump and shouted, Hey, Grandma, you're growing. You're going up. Hang on, Grandma, you better stop or you'll be hitting the ceiling. But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight. This ancient, scrawny old woman was getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as though she was a piece of elastic being pulled upwards by invisible hands. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down. Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma? George said. Daddy just had this whole room repainted. But there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his bedroom, and she was coming through the floor like a mushroom. Whoopee! She shouted, finding her voice. Hallelujah! Here I come! Steady on, Grandma, George said. With a hey, Nonny, no, up we go, she shouted. Just watch me grow. This is my room, George said. Look at the mess you're making. Terrific medicine, she cried. Give me some more. She's dotty as a donut, George thought. Come on, boy, give me some more, she yelled. Dish it out, I'm slowing down. George was still clutching the medicine in the bottle in one hand and the spoon in another. Oh, well, he thought, why not? He pulled out a second dose and popped it in her mouth. Ooh-wee! She screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. I'm on my way now, boy, she called. Just watch me go. That's the attic above you, Grandma, George called out. I'd keep out of there. It's full of bugs and boggles. Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. George stood there in the bedroom gazing through the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor and another in the ceiling sticking up like a post. And between the two was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were now in the room below and her head was in the attic. I'm still going, came the old squeaky voice from above. Give me another dose, my boy. Let's go through the roof. No, Grandma, no, George called back. You're busting up the whole house. Oh, to heck with the house, she shouted. I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. By golly, she is going through the roof, George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out of the back door into the yard. It would simply be awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious. And he, George, would get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. Don't go through the roof, Grandma, he prayed. Please don't. So, let's have a look back at some of the pictures. So what's the first thing that happened when Grandma wished it the medicine? Yeah, the first thing that happened was she jumped. Well, she rose up from her seat and she froze in the same position. Then she came down. And then what happened to her? She blew up like a balloon, didn't she? And then she was on fire. And what did George have to do? Yep, he had to pour some water on her. Then, this is the last thing that happened, well, she started growing, didn't she? She kept on growing. But at one point, she stopped growing. And then what happened? When she stopped growing, George gave her some more medicine and she carried on growing. She went all the way through, and at the end, George is praying, saying, please don't go through the roof, Grandma. Do you think that she'll go all the way through the roof? I think she will, because he's now given her 3 lots of medicine. So I think it's going to be a little while before she slows down. What an exciting chapter. The next chapter is called The Brown Hen. That's quite puzzling. We've gone from the chapter with Grandma gets her medicine to the brown hen. What do you think is going to happen in the next chapter? So, when you did your pictures in the last chapter, you said you were trying to predict what would happen. Did you predict that Grandma would grow, that she would go on fire? Did you predict any of those things, that she would balloon up? Ooh, well done if you did. If not, that's okay, because you've used your imagination and you've done it. Let's come back and we'll see what happens in the next chapter. Bye.